Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Rise and Thrive podcast. Again, we're here with our weekly Sip-Sang segments where we recap what we discussed last night during Sip-Sang. And in this case, it's not last night, but typically it is. For those of you who don't know, Sip-Sang is our weekly wine and consciousness group where we take on deep and diverse topics, all while enjoying a wine paired with the topic of the week. So this last one, I would say last night, but this last one we covered the topic of pressure.
Pressure.
Okay. Why don't you let us know why you chose pressure, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, you bet. It was a busy weekend around both our worlds, so we're getting this done on Monday instead of Friday. For example, you had a lot of pressure going on with one of your projects that you were doing from your web world, right? And it caused for things to need to be, adjusted in this kind of stuff. And so that's an example. I wanted to talk about pressure for a couple of reasons, because one of the reasons is pressure. We wanted to have a part of the discussion about whether pressure is a good thing or a bad thing. How much pressure does it take to tip the scales into where we get into, kind of catabolic stress, if you will. But not only that, one of the things I wanted to do was talk about pressure from a different point of view. And this has to do with one of the breath practices that that you guys are learning, where we're teaching you to use a specific kind of pressure to move energy and frequency up the spine into the brain, specifically focusing on getting some pineal gland activation and stuff like that. So pressure it was.
Very cool.
Yeah. And it was fun connecting it to wine for me this weekend, because it was a perfect pairing with something called carbonic maceration, which is instead of, just for a quick little wine note, is most of the times when wine is made, they pick grapes, they throw them in a hopper, and then they crush them, either with a bladder or some kind of press, right? But in carbonic maceration, what's really interesting is that the grapes are just thrown in a vat. And what happens is they begin to ferment on their own, and their pressure starts to build from the inside out until the skins burst, right? And that's what releases the juices, kind of thing. And ultimately, for me, that was a really great metaphor for, the individual, the intrinsic pressure that we can generate to actually burst out of our own skin and break through to a next level of ourself.
And from non-wine people, that process could be what happened in Pretty Woman, which was Lucille Ball, which is technically the Lucille Ball movie, but I know it from Pretty Woman. When she's stomping on the grapes? No? People used to stomp on the grapes in their bare feet.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tim doesn't watch Pretty Woman.
Lucille Ball doing that. I can remember it clear as day, as her, with her skirt hiked up between her legs, and she's, wow. Having a flashback. Cool.
Yeah, cool.
So anyways, you asked for why I chose pressure, and basically that's the reason why. Basically to see how we deal with pressure, and how we can deal with it in healthier and healthier ways. And one of the ways we can not only deal with pressure, but to utilize pressure that we're intentionally building from the inside in a specific way to actually change our own chemistry and neuropeptide release and cascades. So,
and as we know from the common saying, and well, it's just a fact, diamonds are created under pressure, right?
Absolutely.
And we also listened to Under Pressure by Bowie and Freddie.
Yes.
So that was fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I went through a few songs, right? Joel, Pressure.
I don't remember that one because I didn't like that song.
No, he made mention of that, but it was fun. It was cool to see it was cool to revisit Bowie and Queen doing that whole thing.
Sweet. So I have this handout that you gave us. Maybe if you want to dig into a little bit about what this was all about.
Sure. That handout, that's a spot taken out of Joe Dispenza's book called Becoming Supernatural, which is all about this exact pressure, about how using different meditations and breath practices to actually activate our biology in a different way. And that one in particular had to do with what's called cerebrospinal fluid, Okay. So for those who don't know, cerebrospinal fluid is a fluid that surrounds the spinal cord and the brain. And, one of its jobs is to insulate the, or, protect and cause some lubrication from the spinal cord to, the day-to-day maneuverings of the body. That's just one of the things that happens. But it's actually has its own rhythm, which is interesting. So we have like a heart rhythm, right? Like our heart beats and we have a pulse that way. We also have like a respiratory rhythm, a respiratory pulse. Has to do with how we breathe and stuff. But our cerebral spinal fluid has its own pulse as well. And this is the basis, and accessing that pulse and being able to sense different interruptions in that pulse are what craniosacral therapists have the ability to do. They're trained to sense that pulse and then and be able to explore where those tensions are coming from. And one of the things that's really, really interesting about this whole system is that fluid moves, but we can also move that fluid. So that fluid moves with basically the articulations of our spines and things like this. But even our brains, not our brains, sorry, but our skulls. Our skulls, contrary to what many people think, it's not a solid coconut, right? It's these floating pieces of bone, right? Yeah. See, these floating bones that have sutures, and those sutures can spread apart and come back together when under pressure, under different circumstances. And so what we wanted to do, this particular breath practice had to do with interrupting the regular flow rate or pulse of cerebral spinal fluid. And we actually, contract our bodies in a specific way while doing an inhalation, and take our awareness upwards, if you will. And what that ends up doing is it actually helps flex the sacrum, which is basically like a little pump lever, if you will, which then we force that cerebral spinal fluid up and build up a frequency into the center of the brain. And when we build that pressure up into the center of the brain, some really interesting things happen. If you actually increase the frequency of what you're thinking about, because another super interesting science that Dr. Masaru Emoto spearheaded was that water, fluid, if you will, carries information, right? So if we accelerate the frequency through a higher frequency vibration of emotion, for instance, it gets put up to a scientific process of having different effects in the brain. So I feel like I'm not doing a really great job at explaining the whole process, but ultimately what we want to do is cause that cerebral spinal fluid to start forcing up into our brain, elevate the types of emotion, the frequency of emotions that we're experiencing while we're doing that. And then there's little quartz crystals in the pineal gland that actually will activate and respond in different manners, and different ways to the different frequency that it receives, therefore making a different secretion of hormones and neuropeptides and chemicals to come out, right? And so when you have different chemicals going into your body than you're used to, it offers your body to create a new experience for itself.
Very cool. I think you did a great job explaining it. I don't really understand that kind of stuff, and I could pick up what you were laying down. And it brought up something I learned recently, which is apparently they've created a computer chip with a droplet of water that can hold way more information than anything else they've ever seen.
Wow.
And it's blowing their minds because it shouldn't be possible, right? So what's happening?
Ever see the movie K-Pax?
I did. I don't remember much.
Oh, yeah. There's a one little part in the movie where he goes, there's more potential energy in one drop of water than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, so they're connecting, like the droplet of water is the conductor to the quantum. It's somehow.
Isn't that something? I don't have any reason to not believe that.
And then also I've heard that, if like they've dissected the brains of monks,
Right.
their pineal gland is much larger than the typical person.
Yeah.
And so it's likely they're growing more of these crystals, right?
Yeah. It's like a muscle that you build out, right?
Yeah.
The more you exercise a muscle, the stronger that muscle gets.
Yeah, and they behave like little wands pulling in the information. That's so
Yeah.
cool. I never knew that before.
It's really
Friday,
cool.
Thursday.
It's really neat to start exploring how our physiology is interrelating with the quantum elements of this experience that we're having called life, right? It's very cool.
Totally.
That's really neat. I did not know that about the computer chip. That's
Yeah, I'll look for that article. Yeah, I'll send it.
if you ship that over, that'd be amazing.
So the intent with these is to keep them nice and tight. So I think you've done an awesome job at delivering, kind of a good shell of what we went through. We went through some practices and different things that you're going to have to come to Sipsang to experience.
Yeah.
But in essence, that's kind of what we do at Sipsang. This pressure one was I didn't remember a lot from it because there was so much newly learned stuff. So that's why I'm kind of stepping back in this conversation. But so if you guys are interested in joining us at Sipsang and having these awesome conversations, and everybody brings a little piece to the puzzle that we're, working at figuring out, the never-ending life puzzle.
The never-ending life.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it is. If you think you've arrived, you're certainly stopped growing, It's
For sure.
Yeah.
Grow those crystals. So if you're interested in learning more about Sipsang, then let's pop over to sipsang.com and request an invitation to have a chat with Tim. And after you request your invitation, you're going to be redirected to a thank you page where you can download the 85 signs that you are a Sipsanger. And it's a pretty fun little list Tim and I put together. And I think some of them will be challenging and kind of exciting for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I might make that document a little bit more readily available in the times to come, right? And then see if it's a good fit. If you fit enough of these 85 surefire signs that you're a Sipsanger, then God, let's have a conversation. Let's see if you can bring your wisdom to the group, because that's what this whole thing is there's part coaching in it, but it's really about everyone sharing their own collective wisdom to help raise the energy of the group.
Totally. Awesome. Well, thanks, Tim.
You
Another
bet.
great episode, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Jade. Appreciate it.
All right. Ciao.
Bye now.